Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm having a hard time because this whole journey just feels completely trippy and humorous, and there's nothing to do. Well, there's so much to do, but there's nothing to do but laugh at how wild this is. All I've been thinking over these last few weeks is how strange it is that these things are actually happening right now. For so long in my experience, it was more a feeling of theories or ideas of what needed to happen or what should happen. This whole idea of awakening and humanity and collective energies and all this kind of stuff that is talked about. And here we are, right in the middle of all of it. And it's like you would think we would be completely prepared and know how to deal with this. And we just don't. We're just having to figure it out, which is also something we've kind of said, right? Like we just have to walk through this one step at a time. And also, those are so many things that are just annoying to hear, you know? So it's a bit of a, it's like being in the eye of the storm and also being the storm and also observing the storm from the outside, and also like being the atmosphere within which the storm is happening. So there's this kind of scale of looking and experiencing this experience from multiple different layers and levels and perspectives all at the same time. And it's like the brain is just losing itself, which is what we've always said needs to happen, right? Yet going through it, it's like, oh my God, where am I in all of this? And a big part of what is also really happening in terms of, let's say, like real-time energies that are clearing, is the mind control. And what is so, again, silly about it, right? I was talking to someone about this morning too. It's like, there always, and I'm sure you've all had these experiences, right? Where it's like, you're in your head or you're thinking about things or you're having an experience, but you're also aware to some degree, like, is this an old memory? Is this an old experience? Why am I also seeing it from different perspectives at the same time I'm clearly experiencing it in the present or having memories about something that's similar to it, right? It's like the mind is so warped and twisted in all of its trauma, and yet there's always been that part of us that has known in the center of it all, either that in that moment we could say something's really wrong, or we could say, I know this isn't the full story, there's something else going on here. But to one degree or another, we've always had a level of being present and being conscious in whatever we were experiencing, even if we were also aware it was really, really messed up. And that is really the truth of you as a light being, the truth of your soul, the presence of your soul within you. And that is the piece that has been so targeted and so tracked, and the part of you that other things have really wanted to stamp out, extinguish. And yet that is also the piece which has brought us so much pain and suffering, because we have been so aware during this whole journey, right? So it's madness because the very thing that makes you feel insane and crazy is the very thing that is so pure and true and authentic about you. And how there is nothing in this reality that speaks to that as a truth. This concept and this idea of being a soul, an eternal being, an eternal experience in different variations of either physical or energetic forms. There's nothing grounded here, and there's nothing really rooted here that truly validates that. The closest we get to it is some form of spirituality, or perhaps even religion, or theories and philosophies, right? But they're still ultimately considered not the truth, not mainstream. In the prevailing kind of, how do I describe this? The way through the insanity has actually been to embrace the insanity of it all. And I know I'm not really getting to my point here, but this is also the point of it, right? Is that the brain is like, and the mind, and all these different levels of what we relate to thinking and mental ideas, and the way that we formulate systems in our mind in order to establish a sense of control in our reality is really kind of unfolding and refolding in on itself, right? As these energies are clearing, as things are coming to light. So there's a sense of like walking through this tunnel, and it's not really walking, right? It's like the mind moving through this channel of light. But it's more than the mind, right? It's really the soul as the consciousness, or the consciousness understanding itself as the soul, moving through this and just observing this kind of undulation of opening and closing and moving in and out, reordering your understandings and your belief systems around this one truth, which up until now, for me at least, that truth has always been like, I think I'm crazy. I think I'm just really crazy. But that is that piece of us that represents that eternal light, that eternal soul that we are. So we're really kind of reclaiming where that knowing has been, and letting go of all the things that have tried to interfere with that, to separate that from the rest of the human experience, right? So again, it's like all of these places where we've experienced so much pain around knowing we were the soul. Now, these things are becoming undone. But we can also look at that as where we've also held then so strongly, right, to these like, well, this is the way it has to be. If I'm going to be, or at least look like I'm sane here, I better do it this way, right? So all those things we have attached to, those systems that have provided a sense of security, which were necessary, right, for a while, now they no longer are. And so there's also this feeling of like, well, okay, actually, they weren't required, but they felt like they were required. So was I doing this to myself? Where did this ultimately come from, right? Which leads us back to this kind of relevant, well, that's interesting. The relevant truth for this time right now is that, yes, we are eternal souls. We have always been full and complete. And we are in a world which, for whatever reasons, has a multitude of systems which, for whatever reason, encourage the division of one's true knowing of oneself as an eternal soul. And right now, that is the relative truth that I am finding is most beneficial to moving through what is being released right now. Because it is inherent in these programs, and we see this with those of us who have experienced a lot of trauma, right? And this is the way that the nervous system and the brain truly work, right? The nervous system and the brain are designed to support us, right? But the information that the nervous system and the brain use is what is given to it, right? And what it is able to focus on is essentially a record of what has happened in the past if we are not conscious and giving it new things to focus on, right? So it's not to say that because you've experienced so much trauma in the past, that's what you're going to continue to experience. But it's also not to say that because you have experienced so much trauma in the past, you are recreating this for yourself. And it's also not to say that because you have experienced so much trauma in the past, it is your fault that you're not making better choices, that you're not giving your systems better information to work with. And this is kind of where we're at right now, this rub of all these things. It's like this scrubbing of the fields that's happening. So if we get pulled out too much into any one of these different kinds of ways of thinking about the past or trauma or negativity or the experiences we have had in life up until now, which have not felt to be beneficial, we could get a bit lost. So the mind control is very real. The mind programming is very real. And I really had a very beautiful session last week where so many things that I have just kind of felt were very much confirmed for me. But the thing is, like, these things often, especially in this lifetime, for a lot of us, did not physically happen in this lifetime where we could point to it and be like, this is proof. This is proof that it happened. And this is where we come back to the body and the nervous system. And what I've been saying most recently, most strongly, is that the body is the safest vehicle to be within at this time, because the body will tell you what is true for you. And you know that when someone says something that just sits right with you, right? Or someone says something that's a bit of a different perspective than you've been able to see it. And you can feel the release and the relief that comes through you, right? That is your nervous system responding to what is actually true. So even if logically it doesn't make sense to say, yeah, I was abducted and things were done to my mind. When I say it, and I feel that drop out of me and that sense of relief, that is what matters. That is the only thing that matters. And I think for so many of us, this is such a huge block to us moving forward, because being in this kind of reality, we feel like we need proof. We feel like we need something on paper. And we should, right? I mean, that's kind of the way this world is set up. And yet, if we're looking for that as the answer to feeling better, we're going to be waiting forever, right? So this is where we really have to take control in the sense that we reset our system, our navigation. We reset the way that we validate ourselves, which is that it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else around you. If your body responds to it as a truth, that is what matters, and you need to honor that for yourself. And that, more than anything, is what is going to help you heal and feel more whole and feel more safe in your body, in this vessel. Because let's face it, your body has had some pretty awful experiences in this lifetime. And also, even though there are so many things that are, let's say, very collective, or there are so many of us who have had similar experiences, it's not enough to say, okay, yeah, everyone went through that. Oh yeah, everyone's experiencing that. We have to connect to it within our own selves. And I think for myself, what I've been noticing is that this is a big piece where I've just not come deep enough inside of my own self and given myself that true validation. Look, it sounds insane. I don't know what was going on when I was little. I knew there was some weird shit going down that I couldn't explain. I still can't explain to this day. But it was what I experienced. And I was traumatized. And I felt very alone and scared and frightened. So much so that it has carried through to this day in ways that do not make any kind of sense, right? I can't put a logical explanation on it. And oftentimes things people have said to me like, well, you just need to believe in yourself more. And it's a sense of self-worth. It's like, okay, I get that. And also that is not it, right? So really feeling and connecting to these things that you're feeling in your body. And more than anything, I think the way that I go about it is to just be curious. Like I kind of treat everything like a bit of an experience of an experiment, right? Okay, it sounds crazy, but let me just follow this thought, or let me just follow this idea for a little bit and see if it fits in my body. See if my body has a response to it. And so I tend to just take this lens of curiosity at this point, which curiosity allows for this ease and this grace and this compassion to be in a place with you where we would probably normally start to judge ourselves. Right? So this gentle curiosity, we're just going to experiment. We're just going to play with this and see if it fits at all. And if not, fine, we can throw it out, right? We can try a different story. But let's just be curious, because maybe the very thing that we think is so crazy and insane, and the reason we tell ourselves it's so crazy and insane, because that's exactly what we need to hear, right? And that's also part of the programming. Right? Something was said to me, and I totally resonate with this, and I'm pretty sure I've said it in different ways, maybe even in the same way, many times. But even if our abuser has left, right, we still respond to those triggers in the same way. So even if the original installer of the program is no longer there, as the security checkpoint, right, as the gatekeeper, whatever you want to call it, our systems, our bodies will continue to play that out. We become our own imprisoners, right? We are still running that program. We are still running on the fear. We still respond to the fear, even though the actual threat is no longer standing outside that door. But inherent in that is also so much power, right? Because we actually hold the keys to our freedom. And I will also say that we're at a point in time now, energetically speaking, where it is now really, really safe to let go of these things. Whereas before, there was still a lot of other things that were going on that had not been sorted out yet, right? Where I don't want to say there was actual fear of kind of being, or there was an actual threat of being taken out when we were kind of feeling the fear and exposed to it, but there were certainly other energies that it felt like had gotten in the midst of all these different programs that were triggering like additional things, like backdoor kind of other layers of kind of, it's making me think of like viruses, right? And software protection and that kind of stuff, or virus protection, I guess they call it. But like there were kind of other intermediary energies that had probably been benefiting from the programs too. You know, like we talk about people pleasing, right? I was so well trained to be what everyone else needed. If I'm moving through life as this gigantic people pleaser, right? There's so many people that would benefit, and so many people who could take advantage of that, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to call you out even though I saw that you just like totally did that to my car, but you know what, I don't want to start a conflict, right? So things like that, like there are other things that just naturally came along which benefited but also helped to continue to impose those programs, right? So we're at a point now, all of that to say, we're at a point now where it really is safe to start to explore these. I feel it, I always feel it in the belly, right? It's like the lower sacral, the root, this whole kind of middle range here, this mid range of density, of I don't like to use this word, but it feels a bit like cancerous in the sense, but like we said, right, it kind of grows on its own if it's left unchecked. But also, if we don't realize, like the actual threat is no longer there. And we can take a look at it in order to really understand where it came from, what was the root of it, right? So again, this gentle curiosity, if you're feeling, a lot of it feels very digestive. A lot of it also feels very kind of reproductive organ oriented. A lot of nausea too. Right, really affecting really any of these kind of organs of elimination, right, that help our body process out things that we don't actually require, and also toxins too. So yeah, I've always seen kind of this sense of like space waste or garbage, right? Like this garbage belt. That's kind of what it feels like we're moving through right now. So it can feel like, well, it can feel very scary, right, as these things are starting to come up. But to remember that actually, and this goes for everything, right, we can see it as a challenge or we can see it as an opportunity. And to really remind ourselves to always embrace these things as opportunities to release deeper and deeper and deeper levels of programming. Because what we're really saying is that it's really not the way that we have learned to talk about things in human speak, right? It's really not a matter of, do I just not value myself enough? Do I have self-worth issues? Is it my attachment style, right? Do I have money blocks? Like, those are just human ways of trying to understand this shit that has been very deep inside of us. And to some degree it's worked and it's fit and whatever, but the levels that we are going to now, like, that stuff is not going to work anymore. So we're having to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're finding the source of these things, right? The source of these, and really they're from the galactic ranges, I would say. Not that I ever like to use that word, but they are from beyond this human earth experience. And I've always said a huge part of the reason we are here is not just to heal these things from a human perspective, but also the origins that we are related to and connected to from beyond. We are helping to heal that, not just in ourselves, but at a greater collective range. It's like sending that back home. being able to decipher, decode, unravel the programming and the systems within us. I can feel this opening through the heart now, and sending that understanding and that awareness back to those who are still imprisoned. So yeah, it feels like the energy has really slowed down here. And I just feel to reiterate, like it, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know this. I'm sure you're feeling this. I don't have to say this. It's a trippy time. The brain is undergoing so much release, and yet we know it has to come in stages and layers, right? So that's this kind of sense of like opening up, coming in to see certain things. Okay, we need to close back up. We're going to process this. And then it's this, again, this sense of undulation, moving through these waves, taking a little bit at a time, and just trusting, right, that there is nothing random. There truly is nothing random about what is going on right now. I think oftentimes when we have these experiences, that fear of the unknown, of what is really going on here, can play such a huge role in freaking us out and making us feel even worse, right? But to know that energy itself is inherently organized, no matter what we've been told, right? Like everything just wants to move to chaos. That's actually not true. Chaos is always trying to find order within itself. It's interesting how I'm hearing it coming through. It is the right that is inherent within what we describe as chaos to continually restore itself back to order. And why doesn't that happen? Of course, as we've said, because there are so many things here now which have taken advantage of this perceived moment. It's like as the energy comes around back to reorder, right? It's like things come in at that point when it's still in that process of reorganizing itself, right? It's kind of like just as you have a new thought, or maybe it's a thought that's always been there, but you haven't allowed yourself to really embrace it, right? Or own it. It's like just as you're doing that, as you come into that, and if someone were to say, really? And you start to question yourself, like that's what we're talking about, right? That's what the systems do. That's what the mind control does. We are forever evolving and growing and expanding and reordering into something more and more and more inherently organized. Which, as I say that, right, it's like no one could look from the outside and understand the organization that's going on in here, right? It is so personal and so individual. And yet also, so many of us are having this experience side by side, so it feels collective. There's nothing that is the same about it. So don't allow anyone to insert their, it comes through as like an arrow or a spear, right? Kind of stabbing into your field. Don't allow anyone to insert their lack of belief in their own inherent ability to reorder into your system. And yet essentially we can see that that's what humans have been doing all along, right? It's safer for me if you stay in your chaos so that I don't have to figure out what feels like my chaos. and I can just look at you and feel better about myself, right? But this is where we're moving beyond now and staying in our chaos and allowing those things to detract from our own experience, our own evolution, will create kind of more of this chaotic feeling. Because it's almost like the spin, right? Putting something into the spin and it starts to wobble off of its center. All of this to say that, if you've been experiencing these bouts of like, what's going on with my brain? Like, is this a memory? Where did this happen? Like, where am I right now? You're probably exactly right where you need to be, which is in the middle of reordering all of it. So really, really, really super exciting stuff that's happening. Highly uncomfortable if we are not holding ourselves through it either. So gentle curiosity, ease and grace and compassion, so that you can allow yourself to validate what you are experiencing, even if it makes absolutely no logical sense. Allow it to be true for you. I send you so much love. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.